Hi everyone, welcome to Itsy Bitsy's live read of Evil Sushi by C.A. King, Chapter 1. There was nothing better than the ocean air in the morning. A little sea spray was exactly what the doctor ordered. It cured all that ailed. Inhaling even the tiniest amount of the briny mist cleared the sinuses and the mind. That's what made life in quaint coastal towns special. That's what kept people rooted there, even in the worst of times. Treacle was the epitome of small fishing communities, and been for centuries, standing the test of time against the three bustling East Coast cities bordering it. The people who chose to live there had heard the call of the sea, agreeing wholeheartedly to answer it without question. They understood there were some things that couldn't be learned in a classroom, traditions and skills which were handed down from parent to child, a certain know-how only years of experience could provide, and an understanding of the ocean which was unmatched. The water was calm, perhaps too calm. Underestimating the ocean was a mistake only land dwellers made. Still, it was the rising sun that usually had the final word on the subject. Generation of fishermen had looked to the skies to the predicted day to come. A red sky in the morning was a universal bad omen in any of their books. Rod's was no different. The first sight of orange on the horizon sealed the fate on the day. It wasn't worth the risk to head out of port. Rod stood, staring at the decaying boat. It needed repairs over places that had just been repaired. If business didn't turn around soon, he'd lose everything. He wasn't the only one either. There was a whole row of fishermen in the same boat as him. Not literally, of course. They all had their own vessels, each in equal as poor a state of repair. He watched his friend and neighbors preparing to set out, against the sun's warning, in hopes of a good haul. All of them knew the odds of that happening were slim to none. There were little choice for most. There were mouths to feed and bills to pay. Back in the year 2020, everyone had applauded the choice of the combined nations for opening up international fishing routes. The population was growing. Fishermen's incomes were dropping. Something had to be done. The choice seemed right at the time, even to him. It ended up being one of the worst decisions in the history of man, though, and that's not saying a lot. The truth was, after that, the oceans fell victim to being stripped of life, all to feed a new generation of mouths. Need trumped what could one day happen. Studies were only theories. After all, hunger was a fact. The green movements had maxed themselves out, and their masses becoming complacent with the government initiatives to save the forests and clean the oceans of garbage. No one cared that they were murdering all life below the surface. In fact, no one even noticed until it was too late. Amusingly, the whole issue could be traced back to one generation's obsession with blaming cow farts on all of the world's population. The ozone was depleting. Gas from cows was to blame. The polar ice caps were melting. Heat from cows farting was to blame. Sure, there were studies, but not once did anyone try to gauge how much damage fluctuants from humans was causing. They just laid it all on the cows. Environmentalists were happy to jump on that bandwagon. Beef and other meats began disappearing from grocery stores around the world. All of a sudden, tuna was the new T-bone and salmon the new sirloin. It was a gold rush all over again, except with trout. Everyone and anyone became a fisherman that year, leaving many jobs in the lumber, farming, and other obsolete industries to set foot on a boat for the very first time. The water was filled from dusk to dawn, pulling in the catch of the day. Fish, like any other resource, wasn't sustainable being harvested at that rate. It didn't matter, though. Everyone wanted a piece of the pie. The more sea creatures caught, the more the world demanded. There were bellies to feed and bills to pay. Any time the little guy made a little headway, big corporations were sure to jump in, and there was no different. Large black boats began making their presence known, grabbing whatever they could from the oceans. Making a buck quickly was all they cared about. They harvested and moved on like parasites. There were, of course, a few positives that came from that era. The air was cleaner and the land greener. People recycled more. Plastics were banned. That kept the environmentalists happy. Not that it actually fixed anything. Borrowing from one person to pay another wasn't a solution. Marine life was becoming extinct. It wasn't merely one or two species either. It was all of them. What was a man to do, though, especially when he'd sunk everything he had into a boat and fishing gear? It wasn't as if he could simply toss it all away. Life didn't work that way. No one cared what happened to the little guy when they were on their own, when they had their own families and bills to pay. "Hey, Rod," an older gentleman called out, tossing a rope on the deck. "Grab that for me, will ya?" Rod raced to catch the end, tying up the small boat. "You're in early, Ned. Did you have any luck out there?" he asked. Small talk was merely a formality. He'd already knew the answer. The fish, if there were any, weren't biting. "Nah," Ned replied, scratching his head. "I thought I'd get to jump on things, but when they showed up..." He nodded to a fleet of large black boats just off the shoreline. "Ain't nothing left when they come poking around. It's a real mess out there this time." He tipped his single container filled with his catch for the day, making the contents visible. Most of it not fit for sale. Rod shook his head. "You never know. The demand has been crazy lately. A lot of businesses will take whatever they can get, especially restaurants." "I'll give it a try," Ned said. "I'm not hanging around begging, though. If the price ain't right, this will feed me and my own this week." He grabbed a hose, washing down the deck. You thinking about heading out today?" "I was," Rod admitted. "I might hang back. There's a good chance the winds are going to change in a few hours. With the price of fuel being what it is this week, I need to conserve. I'm thinking about converting old Bessie to a hybrid. It would cut my overhead in half." "That's a name for a horse, not a boat," Ned complained, chuckling. He'd been making that same joke for years and probably would continue to use it until the day he passed on. "Are you sure the changes are worth the cost?" "That's the best part," Rod replied. "If I do the renovations myself, it won't cost more than a few bucks for wiring. I lucked out doing a scrap metal run. I came across a fellow upgrading his solar panels to fancier ones. I picked up the lot he was chucking." "Well done," Ned praised. Let me know if you need an extra hand. I'm staying in for a few days, maybe more." "Any plans?" Rod asked. "Nope," Ned admitted. "I guess I'll be applying for another grant. Doubt I'll get one, though. Most of them are going to the folks working to stop the polar caps from melting. Things sure changed in 5 years, didn't they?" He shook his head, walking away, still carrying his single cooler. It might be time to hang up the old hat. Stop by later if you want. I know Sally would love to see you." He winked. "She won't wait forever. A gal needs strong arms to hold her at night." "I know," Rod replied, a sigh hanging on his words. I wish I had something better to offer her." "You're a good man," Ned answered. "That's all she wants from you. Think about it. She's one catch you don't want to get away. It's not like there are plenty of other fish left in the sea, if you know what I mean," he chuckled. If there were one thing Ned was good at, it was making the worst jokes. Rod stood on the deck deciding which way to go. Men, just like Ned, were a dime a dozen, all washing ashore with sour faces and complaints about the lack of sea life in their necks. There wasn't a solution, even if they all agreed to wait to let life replenish itself. There'd be one asshat in the bunch who wouldn't abide by the decision and ruin everything. One was too many, especially when men were out of work and going hungry. It wouldn't be fair to the others, and just like that, the whole deal would be off. It was governments bickering all over again, but on a smaller scale. Rod took one final glance at old Bessie and called it a day. He had enough fuel for one more extended trip. Saving it was a better idea. He'd get the solar panels up and running and have gas as backup, in case something went wrong on the open waters. He rubbed his neck, stiff from worry. A little rest and relaxation went a long way in his profession. Maybe Ned was right. A visit with Sally was always perfect for lifting his spirits. The weather agreed with his choice, gray clouds swirling, as if God himself had blown them to the exact spot. The first boom of thunder started the race. Who would win? Men packing up their things, battening down hatches, and taking shelter, or wicked waves, white with fury, bashing against the sides of vessels. Rod never bet against nature. Chapter 2. Sally Markle was the last shining star on a dark summer's eve, at least in Rod's eyes. All of the things to attract a man, it was her freckles that did him in, especially when she blushed. Being the shy soul she was, that was often. The visor mirror flung down, fingers pushing on a stubborn patch of hair. It popped back and defiant to the end. Rod glanced around before spitting on his fingers. Wetting the spot would do the trick. There wasn't a lot of time. By now the whole neighborhood, including Ned and Sally, knew he was there. His aging pickup truck still ran, getting him from one place to another. It was coming to the end of its days, though. Turning on or off, the key sparked a sputter of black exhaust. With the latest new and improved emissions tests the government put in place, lurking just around the corner, it was more than likely he'd be back to walking. Not having transportation adding to the growing list of reasons why he hadn't swept Sally off her feet. She deserved a man who could offer more than a strong jaw and promises that might never come true, even if it would likely kill him if she ever found it with someone else. The driver's side door squeaked, signaling the start of the neighborhood's dog band. Their howl and bark serenaded hit new heights the closer he came to the porch. There was nothing to worry about, though. None of them lived there or even close for that matter. It was miles to the next house. Sally's one pet was a tabby cat named Killer. An odd name, considering it was anything but. He was the sweetest ball of fur in that neck of the woods. The door opened before he had a chance to make a fist. It didn't come as a surprise. Around there, keeping a coat of paint looking fresh for as long as possible was important. Knocking left scuff marks, and there wasn't a doorbell in the county that still worked, save for a handful of rich folks. "Come on in," Ned offered, holding the door open. "Sally's almost got dinner finished. I decided we'd keep what I caught." He nodded to a spot on the sofa. "You want a beer?" "No, thanks," Rod answered. Ned often offered more than he should have. In those parts, a man's beer was as precious as his boat. Accepting the brew might well have ended up causing resentment later, when the gold liquid ceased to flow. "I'm driving." "You're a good man," Ned said, popping down in his armchair. "Have you seen this show? It's good for a chuckle." And Ned was gone, lost in the world of television, leaving Rod alone in silence. A high-pitched meow and leg rubbing at least gave him something to do. "Hey, Killer," Rod said, rubbing under the cat's chin and behind the ears. "What you up to, huh?" "Killer sure does like you," Sally said. "He doesn't take to people often, you know. Whenever there's company, he usually hides out under the bed." "He seems friendly enough to me," Ned said. "Don't you, boy?" "You're the exception, I tell you. You want some water?" Sally asked, "or I can make some lemonade if you'd like." Thank you for listening to this portion.